Welcome to our first lesson in Premiere. Today we're going to be looking at the interface and getting a sense of what is new in Premiere and what we can do within the interface. So the first thing we're going to do, take a look at Brightspace and take a look at what we're going to be doing for this lesson. So first thing you should notice is that this is recommended to be 80 to 100 minutes. So don't spend too long on this. Don't spend more than about a period and a little bit more than a period, because you'll end up wasting a lot of time on this. And we do get into more detailed work as we progress through the unit. A couple things I'll notice as we go through this: you're going to be downloading some source material. We're also going to be using YouTube creator account, which you'll need to create a new kind of a generic Gmail account so that you don't use your school account. Your school account has limitations for YouTube. We'll be using YouTube extensively in this module, so you'll need to create that account. In addition, you should always check the key concepts. So you'll see right here, it outlines all the key concepts you need to know. So pay attention for those in the video. These are terms that you should know and concepts that you should understand. For each module, there will be a set of requirements, things that you must do in your final output. So do read those, make sure you have an idea of what those things are. For each lesson, there will be a tutorial, sometimes a lesson that teaches you some concept that you'll need to understand. And then in this one in particular, there are 2 tutorials and a demonstration of what your final montage will look like. At the end, there's a submission with set of requirements, including what your project should be submitted to, where it should go, and what goes up on your Wix blog entry. So do read all of that information. The other thing you should notice is that in this lesson, there is no quiz, but some lessons do have a mini quiz for which you'll need to get a mark that's higher than 70% to continue. Okay, so let's jump right into Premiere. Premiere looks like this. You can find it in your tab. Make sure that you're opening right now we're using the Pro 2025 version. So if you have an older version like 2024, make sure that when you open it, this is what your interface looks like. This is the opening screen for Premiere. And so for right now, we have nothing open. It may pop up some kind of tutorial or what's new. You can just close out of that and get right into the tutorial. We're going to click on New Project and we're going to get started. When this happens, it'll open up a dialog box that asks you, where would you like to save this program? This is going to be called Montage 2.1. So here we have Unit 2, Lesson 1. I'm going to title this 2-1-Montage, and I'm going to add the word demo for myself. You don't need to do that. You just need to add 2-1-Montage. Where are you going to save this? I want to save this on my desktop. So I'm going to go choose location. I'm going to open this up to go to my desktop. I'm going to find my named folder. If you don't have a named folder, you're going to create it. It should be called your username or your first or last name, whatever. And then in that, we're going to create a folder called 2-1-Montage. And in that, we're going to create a new folder called Source, which we will use later. I want to click on the Montage, the 2.1 Montage folder, because that's where I want to save my project. Hit Select. Just check that this says the same thing that you see here, or for your user, it'll be period 1, period 2, or period 3. Desktop, your named folder, and then 2-1-Montage. You can leave template as it is and hit create. If you get any pop-ups asking for access, you can just say okay to those. We can close out any of this. This is a tutorial, so we're going to hit skip here. We don't need this for now. And now we're looking at the standard interface. This interface is one of many workspaces that you have. If I click on this right here, workspace, it'll show me that I have a number of different workspaces. What that means is, depending on what I'm doing, these palettes or windows that you can see I'm clicking on will change orientation or close and reopen different palettes depending on what I want to do. So if for example, I'm doing color correcting, I might choose the color, and then you'll notice that all those palettes changed position. If I'm doing audio, it opens up a whole totally different set of tools. And if I'm doing any of these, I have a number of palettes. The reason for that is because there are lots of different tools within the software, and depending on what you're doing, you may or may not need all of the palettes. And so to kind of efficiently make use of the space and to prioritize what you're doing, we're going to go to the editing layout. We also want to reset that to here. It says resave to save layout. And we want that to be the way it starts to look the same for your interface as it is on the tutorial. So that when I'm looking at, any of these tabs or Windows, you can find the same thing on yours. The first thing I just want to notice is that each of these tabs has got a name. This is the program monitor. This is the source monitor. Here we have our project tab. Here we have our timeline. Okay, also properties over here. Each of these also has tabs. So if I go here to my project window, I can also go to media browser, graphics, templates, libraries, etc., effects. Some of these are going to be things that we use often and some are not. You can move these around by clicking and dragging the tabs around, but for now we'll leave it the way it is. If you do happen to move things around, say I take this, I put this up here, I change where this goes, I drag it into this, you'll notice I'm moving and kind of messing around where things are. I can reset that again by going workspace, save to work, reset the save layout, and that goes back to the original layout. All right, let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how to open our files and where to save things. So the first thing I want to make sure that I do is make an association between where my working file is and where my source materials are. So if you remember, I created a folder that was called 2.1, and I also put in a folder that was called source. Source are the files that you're going to be downloading. So if I go over to Brightspace here, over to the lesson, I click on source material, it's going to take me to Dropbox. I click on that. Because I'm logged in, because it's my account, it takes me directly. You might get a pop-up that says, I know you have to log in, or do you want to sign in? You don't need to. You can just click continue with download only, and it should take you to this folder. We want to download all of this. So I click on download here. It says here, continue with download only. That's going to automatically download here into your downloads folder. And if I click, once it finishes downloading, I'll get a little folder here, and I'm going to open that folder up. Now, these folders here, this item here needs to be saved in the place I'm going to work with it. So if you remember, I had my desktop. I'm going to open another browser, go to File, New Finder window, and I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to go to my named folder, which I called username, and here's my 2.1 montage. I'm going to go to the source and drag this zip file. I need the contents of that zip file saved into this folder. Before I do that, I'm going to double click this. It'll open up a new folder, and I'm going to select all of these items. You can either drag and select all of them, or click on the first one, hold shift, click on the bottom one, and then I'm going to drag the whole thing from here into this source folder. So now I've got montage, my working demo, which is my my project, Premiere project, and source, which is here. Now, the way I talk about this in class is we want to keep the association between the location of this and the location of these. We want that to stay. We don't ever want to move things or take them from another place. That's why we don't want to save them in our downloads. We want to have them saved in this source folder. If we ever take a file and use it in our project and end up moving it, Premiere will not be able to find that file. Okay, so don't move things after you have put them into your folder. Be proactive about putting them in the correct place before you start doing any editing. Okay, let's close this up and close this up. We're going to go back to our lesson here. Once you've downloaded your source material, you're going to return to Premiere. And at this point, I can import my media. I click import media. I can actually just double click in this area. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to the place I think I am, which is that 2.1 montage demo. Okay. And notice that it has now added, Premiere has added another folder here. I just wanted to show you what this is. This is an autosave. So what's happening here is Premiere will save your recent work or your recent progress in an autosave. There will be a number of folders here. You can ignore that for the most part. That's only really relevant if you have a computer glitch or a crash or something like that. Sometimes it will save your most recent work, which is sometimes helpful. Next, I'm going to go and import our file. So we're trying to import our files into this. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to hold shift, click on the bottom, and that's going to import all of my files into my project. Once I get to this point, I now have my files here, and I want to just go through a couple of notes about what we're looking at. To view in more detail this information, I want to be able to look at more information. There's a scroll wheel or scroll bar here, but that's quite awkward to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hit tilde on my keyboard. The tilde key is a squiggly kind of line underneath the escape key on the top left of your keyboard. While I have this selected, the blue line around here, if I hit tilde, this goes full screen. I hit tilde again, it goes back to the small screen. If I'm clicking on my timeline and I hit tilde, again, it goes up to full screen and back. So this is a good way to zoom in and see detail based on what you're doing. I want to see these files in full screen, so I hit tilde and here are my files. There's a lot of information here, but for now, all we really care about for now is the video information, which is the physical size of the video we're working with, and the frame rate. Okay, so to just very quickly outline what I'm talking about here, here we have some numbers that you may or may not recognize. Okay, this 1080 right here, you may have heard the term 1080p. This is what it's referring to. That means 1920 pixels across the left to right of my video and 1080 pixels from the top to the bottom. Okay, that's called high definition, HD. You may have also heard 4K. 4K is another term, which means it's 3,800 and something across the top. It's twice as high or highly dense, and 2,000, I think, from top to bottom. And then there's a couple other sizes as well. The one that we care about really is just this right here, 1080p. Okay. Now, what you'll see here is one of these clips, this one here, aerial view, is 4,096. That's quite a large video file. So what we're going to do here is take a look at why we care about this. So I'm going to go back to my regular size. I need to create what's called a sequence. A sequence will be all of the video and audio for my final output that is going to be sequenced together. Sequenced means ordered together. So it's going to be put from beginning to end, from the beginning of my video to the end of my video. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag this from here into my timeline. As I do that, what you'll notice is it's going to make a duplicate here in my project folder of a file called aerial view. So I drag this over here, and suddenly this shows up. We have a new file called aerial view. This icon is different than this icon. You'll see most of them are this icon here. There's another one here and another one here. These icons tell you what type of element this is within my video. A sequence is exactly what I mentioned. It's a sequence of video and audio put together. This sequence will end up being my final project with all of the sequenced video organized in a way that I decide I want it to be. This here, each of these clips is a clip that has two elements. We've got a video. That purple icon is video, and that green icon is audio. And you'll see down here, this clip only has video, and these clips only have audio. This is an audio track. This is solely a video track with no audio, and this is a combination of both. These tracks have both a video track and audio track. What you'll see here is that there's a divider. I'm going to delete this. There's a divider between the top half and the bottom half. These are my video tracks here. Okay, we've got these video tracks, and we've got audio track down here. Okay, V1, V2, V3 are video tracks, audio 1, audio 2, audio 3. For example, you might have audio of a dialogue, someone talking, but in the background, you might also have some music. So those are going to require two different audio tracks to have music and whatever dialogue is happening. For video, we may or may not need more tracks, and we can add more as we go, but for now, we'll just be using what we have here. Now, we created this sequence. I removed some elements from this, but if I add another element on here, it's not going to create a new sequence because I've already created this sequence here. Aerial view is this aerial view here. So I'm just adding this clip to that track. But what you'll notice here is it says there's a clip mismatch warning. It tells us that the settings are different. Now, if you notice, I created the clip. I'm going to say keep existing for now. I created the clip from this aerial view, and it did two things. One, it recorded the frame rate, which was 23.976, and it used that to make this setting for here. And if I go to the end here, you'll also notice that the physical size, which is this 4,096, was also used to create the physical size of this clip. When I dragged in this traffic light, the Premiere noticed that this size and this frame rate is different. And it says, hey, that's a mismatch. That's not the same. So when I put this in here, it said, hey, do you want to keep the settings that you had, which are these settings, or do you want to use the new settings? Now, what I want to do is be specific about what I'm doing every time I create this so that things make sense. Notice if I put this clip in here, this video clip doesn't fill the entire frame. And that's because this clip traffic light is too small for the frame that I created. This is a 1920 by 1080p video clip, which is 1920 across by 1080p up and down, except the frame is 4,096. So 4,000 makes a much bigger frame than we need for this clip. If I take this aerial view, for example, and put this clip in here, you'll see that this is fine. This is the right size because this is much physically bigger. And this frame or this sequence is based on these settings. But here you can see it's much too small. Okay, so let's delete this and be a little bit more specific about what we're doing. We're actually going to delete this sequence, okay, and we're going to create a new one. We want to do this before we start. I want to think about, what do I care about? Well, I care about my physical size. So all of these are 1920. I can use any of these. And the other thing that I care about is frame rate. Now, we'll learn more about frame rate as we do more of this, but for now, we're going to use 24 frames per second. In a nutshell, very quickly, frame rate just means how many still images are used per second to make my video. Video is simply sequenced sort of images, static images that don't move, but they're sequenced quickly enough that they make it look like things are moving. And it's called persistence of vision, and your brain fills in the gaps. If you watch something that has low frame rate, like 15 or 10 frames per second, well, that's what FPS stands for, frames per second. If you watch something with low frames per second, it'll look choppy. You'll be able to see where each image, static image, stops and changes. Something like this, 50 or 60 frames per second, this is used for things that are moving quickly, typically gaming or sports. So if you have, for example, a baseball game or a hockey game where a puck or a ball is moving at a very quick rate of speed, that's going to move much faster in a short amount of time. So you have more frames in your second, more frames used per second to capture the movement and the amount of distance it moves. All right, for us, we want this guy. We want 24 frames per second, and we want a physical size of 1920 by 1080. So I'm going to drag traffic light into my timeline here, and it's going to create a new element in my project folder here. There it is, traffic light, and it's based on the settings. So I'm going to double click this, and I'm going to call this montage. This is going to be the sequence that we're working with. Now, if you ever want to see the details of your sequence because you're not sure about them here, you can also go up here to go sequence settings, and you'll see that in fact it gives us a 24 frame. Oops. Oh, I shouldn't have changed that. Hold on. I'm going to cancel that. I hit my scroll wheel there for a second. Sequence settings, 24 frames per second and 1920 by 1080. These are the settings that we want. Okay. I cancel that and let's continue. So I mentioned that we are dragging items into here. I'm going to also mention that we can use this source and this program monitor. I'm going to delete this for now. So I'm going to click on this and hit delete on my keyboard. I'm going to double click this traffic light. Here we have a traffic light, and you'll notice that every time I click any of these items, it just shows me in my source monitor what that video is. We should always go through all of your source. So I'm going to double click this. I'm going to hit play and see what's here. Okay, that's a drone flying over a scene, and you can see that there are cars in here. I'm going to pause that. Okay, if you want, you can also scrub forward and backwards by you dragging this playhead, which is also called a scrubber, forward and backwards. I'm going to double click. I won't double click montage because that's a sequence. Double click traffic light, hit play, and that's just a light changing, flashing back and forth from yellow. Driver's seat. Okay, and we're going to go through, you should do this, get in the habit of seeing what your video is, just to have an idea of what's here, so you have an idea of what your work can look like. Okay, let's attack. You can do this on your own. Let's jump back over to Brightspace. At the very bottom of this page, you can see what this clip should look like. So I'm going to hit play here. I'm going to pause it there. You can watch this on your own, but it's a 30-second clip that goes through each of the elements. And you can see that some of the elements you already recognize. We had that key clip come up. We've got that tachometer. We have a car backing up. So you can scroll through this and see that you recognize those clips from the list that we downloaded from Dropbox over here. These all exist here. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drag over a element from here into our source monitor and then take a look at what we can do with that. A couple of things to note. First of all, because this clip has, as you can see, a video and a audio, when I drag this from here into my timeline, it drags two. Okay? It gives me a video and an audio clip. I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. You'll notice when I drag this in, it only gives me one. It only gives me video because there is only video in this clip. I'm going to keep existing and delete that. And if I drag the audio, you'll see it only drags audio because there is only audio with this clip. If I am using a clip like the ignition key here, and I hit play, you'll see there's audio and video with this. So when I drag this one in, Okay, it brings both of these together and it includes both. If, however, I delete that and I want to only bring one or the other, I can do that from the source monitor. I can bring just the video and just the audio. And these will now be separate elements. Or if I bring them together, it brings both connected. I can also unlink them by right-clicking and selecting unlink. And once I do that, I can treat them independently as well. I can change the timing and I can change where they are on different tracks, depending on what I need to do. Okay, so you have some controls over those. Let's take a look at some other things we can do. I want to be able to edit this in my source monitor. So I'm going to go to the beginning here. I'm going to take a look at what's happening. As I go through this, you can see just here, these numbers are changing. And as I do, we go all the way to the end and we get to the number 632. Now we're used to looking at a clock that has hours, minutes, and seconds, but this has additional information. This is our number of frames in this sort of sequence. So this here is 6 seconds long, and this 32 is 32 frames. So let's go back here. I'm going to hit play. And you can see that this is going through some numbers, and it gets up to the very top. As I go through here, you can watch, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. This is seconds. But this 38 here is telling me the number of frames that I'm on. So if I go back to the very beginning here, I'm on 0 seconds and the first frame, which is 0, 0. If I go 1 frame forward, which is here, it takes me to the second frame, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. If I go all the way to the end of this here, we get to 49, because this is the 50 frame per second. It gets to 49, and then the next frame starts at 0, because that is 1 second. Okay, so let's look at some other examples. Traffic light. This is a 24 frame per second. So I go back to 0. My first frame is 0, 0. My next frame is 1, 2, 3, all the way up to the last frame in this second, which will be right before it gets to 1 second. The next frame is going to be 1 second. So I hit this, and this 23 is going to go to 0 because that's now 1 second. Okay, and that's how time code works. As I work through this, you can also do things like click on this and say I want to go to 3 seconds. I can type 300 and hit enter, and it'll take me to the 3 second mark. By clicking here, if I want to go 400, hit enter, it takes me to that. If I want to go to the 1 second and 15 frames, 115, it'll take me to the 1 second and 15 frames. Okay, I can also use the arrow keys here to move forward and backward one at a time. And you can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move forward and backwards in time. Let's set that back over to here. Now, what do I want to do in my clip? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to bring over the ignition keys, which is this clip, which is a 6-second clip, right? I want to bring that in and use that in my timeline. So I'm going to go and grab this clip. I'm going to drag it in here. And we're going to keep the existing settings. We've now got this here in our program monitor. This program monitor is showing me a preview of my final video. This is what we're going to be working on, okay? So as we move through this tutorial, we'll be learning a number of editing techniques and ways to move things, around, up and down on my timeline and where we can move them. But for now, we're just going to experiment with how we can do this. So what you should do now is just take a couple of different tracks and drag them out just to see what happens as you move them around. Notice that you can pick them up and move them from, oops, be careful. There's a little line here which actually changes your volume. We'll talk about that later. But when you're picking things up, make sure you're not picking it up by the line. Notice that if I put my cursor over that line, it gives me this little double arrow, and that actually changes a setting on this clip, which I don't want to do. Same thing here. So just make sure you're picking it up by the actual file, which is that. Okay, we can move things around. I can also stack things and on top of each other. Notice that when I drag this here, it actually overwrote what was there. If I drag this way, it's going to overwrite the audio that's there. So be careful of that as well. What I might want to do is put that on its own layer and bring this here. If I want to bring this back, notice I can put my cursor at the end here and just drag this. Well, I've got to unlink it. Hold on. Right now that they're linked because I made some changes. So I'm going to go right here, unlink. I'm going to drag this back out to bring back the audio. Okay, that's another thing I can do. I can lengthen or shorten elements by clicking here or here to change the length of the clip. Okay, let's delete a bunch of these. The next thing I want to do is take a look at just moving around edits within my source monitor. So we looked at how we can edit objects here in our timeline. Let's do the same thing over here so we can learn some variety. I'm going to open up my ignition keys, double click, view it here. Right. And I can do a couple things. First of all, let's say this is a, what is this, 6-second clip. Let's open up, actually, we'll go to the arrow view. Okay, this is a longer clip. This is a 12-second clip. And so actually it's even longer, 16 seconds. Okay, and it's just basically a drone flyover. Say I want to have the, the 4 seconds that happens between 8 and 12 seconds in my timeline. I'm going to click here, I'm going to type 800. That takes me to the 8-second point, but I want my clip to start here. So what I can do is click here on this little mark in icon, or I can hit I on my keyboard, and that's going to gray out the right side. This sets this as a new endpoint for this video. I want 4 seconds, so I'm going to click here and go 1200, and that takes me to the 12-second point. I'm going to mark out by hitting O on my keyboard or this curly brace, and that marks out 4-second clip here. So this 4-second clip now is the 4 seconds that I want at that point. Notice I can do this. I can click here and say go to my endpoint, and that will take me to my endpoint. I can also clear my endpoint by going to the 0 point over here and resetting a new mark in, and that will be now going from 0 all the way to the 12-second point. Okay, that's not what I want, so I will put that back to 800 and set this, and I can navigate to my out point or my in point by using these. Now what I want to do is I want to bring this into my timeline. I've now edited it. I want to bring it in. So I've told Premiere that this is the 4 seconds that I want. I can click on this here where it says overwrite, and it's going to add this to the 2 tracks that are currently active. So here, V1 and A1. I hit this little insert, or sorry, overwrite, and it sticks it in right here. And notice that that is only 4 seconds, right? There's 5, 0 to 5. That's a 4-second clip, okay? And so what that's doing is taking the piece that I wanted. Once I do that, if I do make changes or I do change my mind, I want to lengthen it, I can always do that, okay? So you're not stuck with anything that you have edited, but you have the option to make changes depending on what you want to do by moving things around. I'm going to undo that because I actually do want the first 4 seconds of this. And then I'm going to add in my next clip, which is going to be my traffic light. So I'm going to grab this traffic light. I'm going to double click it here. And I'm going to, again, this is 21 seconds. I'm going to go to the 10-second point, 1000, hit enter. Then I'm going to hit in to mark in. I'm going to go here to the 14-second point. I'm going to mark out, and I'm going to drag from, I can actually do this in one of 2 ways. I can bring the video only, okay, like that. I think I can also drag from here. This is traffic light. If I bring that in, notice that that's the 4 seconds, not the 21 seconds, because I've made this change here and said these are my new marker points, okay? So if I delete this, say I clear this and I say clear my in and outs, now if I drag this in, it's going to drag the whole 21-second clip. So making changes here by making a out and, well, hold on, let me change that to 8 seconds. That's going to be my in, and 12 seconds. That's going to be my out. That changes how this is affected because I've told it these are my new in and out points. Okay, so that's how we sequence items together. We're going to continue in the next video learning how to, or actually doing the tutorial, which you'll see here. And those requirements that are listed here are going to be part of our final video. Okay, all right, we'll stop that there.